We found ourselves nestled on the couch. The dim glow enveloped the space with only the soft flicker of the television casting a gentle blue hue upon the living room walls. His thigh grazed mine intermittently, almost as if he were unaware of the contact. However, I observed. For years I had been observing. The sound was barely audible. The house was silent, with everyone else having retreated to their slumber. My husband had taken something for his back and drifted off early, while his son, my best friend's boy, inquired if he could wrap up the movie downstairs before heading home. It was pure. It began at the very least in that manner. Then his hand faltered. It lacked any sense of drama, nothing extravagant. His fingers moved slowly, hesitantly gliding between us. They brushed against the outer surface of my leg. I stood still, my breath trapped in my throat. He left it where it was. I didn't either. My chest expanded with a sudden breath. The atmosphere grew unexpectedly dense. The dancing figures on the display held no significance anymore, merely ephemeral silhouettes. My heart raced, echoing in my ears. I remained motionless, feigning that everything was as it had always been. Yet all had changed. His pinky finger curled ever so slightly. It lay against my thigh, purposeful in its presence. Not a mistake, a decision. His breath had become a gentle whisper. The warmth of his presence enveloped me. Then he flipped his hand over, revealing his palm. I gazed at it, ajar, anticipating. My fingers danced restlessly in my lap. I did not take it. Yet I remained still, not rising from my place. He inched forward ever so slightly. The tension was palpable in his breath, a tightness that spoke volumes. His voice was a whisper almost lost in the air. "Are you all right?" he murmured. I inclined my head in agreement, and that was the only approval he required. His hand settled on my leg, warm and steady, a comforting presence. Not forcing, simply asserting presence. His palm pressed against my skin, radiating warmth. His fingers wrapped gently around my thigh, a touch that felt both soft and intimate, just as he had envisioned it countless times before. As if I had no choice, I remained silent. My breath became unsteady, my gaze fixed on the screen. A character's laughter echoed through the screen, a sound that felt almost otherworldly, as if it were an outsider in the space we occupied. Then his thumb shifted, a gentle caress tracing the contour of my leg. A subtle movement, yet it shattered a part of my being. My stomach knotted with tension. My thighs came together, a gentle embrace of flesh. My fingers tightened around the fabric of the blanket, yet I did not intervene. As his hand crept upward, deliberate and gentle, I allowed my knees to part just a fraction. I'm uncertain of the reason. Perhaps I do after all. I had felt a profound sense of solitude for an extended period. For years I had not experienced the sensation of being truly desired. My husband had become distant, preoccupied. I ceased my efforts. I ceased my inquiries. However, this was an urge I couldn't articulate, a sensation that lingered after being concealed for far too long. I believed that silence would shield us from harm. I admit my mistake. He was the son of my closest friend. I once entered into the bonds of matrimony. He was in his 30s, still in the bloom of youth. I had aged, expected to possess greater wisdom. I ought to have been the one to set the boundaries. Instead, I parted my legs as his hand brushed against the inner curve of my thigh. Our lips never met. Not at this moment. He barely acknowledged my presence, his gaze fixed on the screen as his fingers lingered, drawing warmth from my skin. I pressed my teeth into my lip. My body turned against me, each cell surrendering to his caress. Every fiber of my being was shouting that this was not acceptable. I had to put an end to it. Yet I did not, due to my inability to do so. He finally leaned in, not to kiss me, but to murmur softly, "No need for words. If that's what you desire, I'll cease." I chose not to respond. As his fingers brushed against the edge of my shorts, silence enveloped me, and I remained unresponsive. I wished for him to continue to keep going without pause. This evening is not suitable, not after all that I had concealed. Not after all the moments I had reassured myself it was merely attention, merely comfort, merely insignificant. He caressed me as if I were a treasure deserving of longing, as if he had been longing for ages to be near me. Perhaps he indeed had. May divine assistance be upon me, perhaps I had been waiting as well. And as I finally shifted my gaze, locking eyes with him, silence enveloped the moment. I just pressed my lips to his. The trembling was slow and quiet, a subtle vibration in the stillness. Years of restraint converging into a single breath. In that instant, I realized that this was irreversible. What actions would you take if the individual you were meant to avoid was the sole person who truly understood your essence? Sleep eluded me that night. Long after he had departed, and even after I secured the door and nestled into bed, beside the man to whom I remained tethered by law, sleep eluded me, for the reason that all had transformed, and nothing could return to its former state. If you've ever held on to emotions that remained unspoken, then this tale may resonate with you in a profound way. We would greatly appreciate your support through likes and subscriptions. The more time you spend with these narratives, the more they will seek out others who require them just as subtly. Let us commence. I have been united in marriage for 21 years. We do not engage in conflict. We maintain a calm demeanor. Our conversations have become scarce. The gentle sound of dishes meeting one another, accompanied by the familiar exchange of courteous inquiries. Have you eaten? At what hour do you plan to depart? Could you please pick up some milk on your way back? Comfort in the known can sometimes evoke unease. At times it seems as though a veil of numbness envelops everything. The evening spent on the couch was not a spontaneous occurrence. It emerged from years of unspoken words, from fleeting looks, exchanged in spaces devoid of warmth. Long ago, I ceased to seek out the warmth of touch, and he ceased to offer it even earlier than that. The man who occupied the seat beside me that night had been a familiar presence for years. He was the son of my closest friend. Spent my childhood moving in and out of our home, slumber parties with my little ones, grilling gatherings, days by the pool. In those days, he would affectionately refer to me as Miss Rachel before his voice had deepened. And then it happened. Upon his return from college, he appeared taller and more robust, perhaps a touch overly confident. Neither arrogant nor complacent, simply observant. His gaze would find me in the crowd, a silent acknowledgement, when the world around us faded, and perhaps that was what pierced my heart the most. A keen observer in the midst of it all. There was a time, perhaps 2 years back, when he mended our fence following a fierce storm. With my husband away, I attempted to tackle it on my own, wrestled with the gate for more than an hour. He rounded the corner, spotted me labouring in the grass, and gently relieved me of the tools I held. Remained silent. I've just resolved the issue. Yet the moment his hand grazed mine firm and unwavering, lingered in my mind far longer than it ought to have. I reassured myself that it was merely a sense of gratitude. I was projecting. I found myself weary. Yet that was not the sole occasion. He took his time while speaking with me. He consistently inquired about my well-being, not as a mere formality, but with genuine intent, as if he could perceive the fractures I kept hidden. One evening, amidst the celebration of his mother's birthday, he found me in the kitchen, quietly placing cake plates into the dishwasher. He rested against the counterarms crossed, simply observing me. "You seem weary," he remarked. A chuckle escaped my lips. Attempted to craft a humorous quip. "You'll truly understand the essence of fatigue once you reach your 40s. Yet he offered no laughter in return. "C'est ça. I believe I would still be able to identify that particular kind of exhaustion," he remarked, at that moment. I ought to have turned my back and left. Instead, I remained rooted in place. As the rinse water continues to flow, I feel a tightness in my chest and the dampness of my hands. I remained silent. It was the inaugural moment when I sensed the change. He had outgrown his childhood, and I was not unseen by him. The weight of that realization filled me with dread. Yet it ignited a spark within me that had long been dormant. It's more than mere desire. Existence. A person truly perceiving my existence. He began to spend the night more frequently during his visits. He mentioned that he appreciated the tranquility of our home, My husband enjoyed the presence of another man, in need of assistance for the yard, particularly with relocating the heavier items. I chose not to voice any grievances. I feigned indifference as he sat at the breakfast table, shirtless, casually sipping his coffee, though a flutter of anxiety stirred within me. I reassured myself that all was well, for nothing had transpired. Until it finally happened. Yet even prior to that evening on the couch, fractures had begun to form within me. Minor cracks, silent sorrows. I would lie in bed beside my husband, feeling as though I were a spectre, as if it lingers in the shadows, a remnant of what once was yet still holds on to existence. I would observe my hands as they aged, pondering the moment they ceased to be caressed for joy and instead became tools of necessity. As I gazed into the mirror, the reflection revealed not a spark of desire, but merely the essence of function. He unearthed something I never realized I had buried deep within. It is not love. Reality, simply existence, the excruciating yet exquisite sensation of craving attention. And the more I resisted, the further it dug into my being. He would sit next to me as if we were kin. Now he rests next to me, a force I cannot escape. There was a lingering sense within me, an unshakable feeling that something was on the horizon. Not what one would expect. Not at this moment. Yet there is something. And a part of me, the part I hesitate to acknowledge, still yearned for it. I never anticipated its arrival on such a tranquil evening, the television casting a soft glow, his hand resting on my thigh, as if it had been destined to be there all along. A certain silence lingers, one that leaves the space untouched. It constricts it. It was as if each moment we spent in solitude following that night in the kitchen carried a weight of unspoken tension. We remained silent about the unspoken truths that lingered in the air. Yet we were acutely aware of how our movements had shifted, adopting a slower, more deliberate pace. Or perhaps overly cautious. He began to lend a hand more frequently with the household chores, small details, picking up groceries during his overnight stay, repairing the damaged drawer in the laundry room, replacing the porch light bulb unprompted. Initially, I convinced myself that he was merely being courteous and supportive, that this was simply his nature. Yet there arrived instances that proved unproductive, simply near. It was one of those nights when I found myself awake meticulously folding laundry into neat piles. All others had retreated to their slumber. He entered silently, his bare feet making no sound, a shirt draping loosely from one shoulder. "You're constantly occupied," he remarked. I chuckled softly. Such is the essence of adulthood. He rested against the dryer. "Have you ever paused?" I didn't respond. I was unaware of how to proceed. That moment is etched in my mind with an absurd vividness. The unchanging drone of the dryer, the fragrance of freshly laundered cotton, the dim yellow glow emanating from the solitary bulb above, and how his gaze remained fixed on me. The atmosphere shifted around me. He refrained from making any contact with me, yet his presence bore down on a structure I hadn't recognized was crumbling. It wasn't always so clear. At times it was the nuance of a gaze that held just a moment too long, a hand that grazed my own as the salt was exchanged, a whisper close to my ear amidst the cacophony of the room. We discovered the art of coexisting in close proximity, never once breaching the invisible boundary that separated us. Until we finally took that step. One evening, my husband ventured out for a reunion dinner. Once more, it was just the two of us. The children had ventured outside. The house seemed overwhelmingly spacious for merely two inhabitants. Silence envelops the space. He lounged in the den, feet elevated, casually flipping through the channels as if he were a permanent resident. "I can't find anything worthwhile," he murmured. "Why not give the old movie channel a shot?" I suggested, settling down next to him on the couch. At least they don't feign superiority over their true selves. He discovered an object in shades of black and white. Humphrey Bogart. Leisurely conversation. Numerous eyes shrouded in darkness with tendrils of smoke twisting through the atmosphere. We took our seats. Amidst the stillness, the sort that hummed deep within your chest. The warmth of his presence enveloped me, not unsuitable. Simply, here. Our knees brushed against each other, neither a product of intention nor a mere coincidence. I remained still. In that moment, I sensed it, his hand softly brushing against my thigh. A subtle transformation, not assertive, calm and composed, simply. Here it is. I focused intently on the screen, yet within me a tumult of emotions surged. He refrained from pushing it any further. He simply abandoned it there, poised, anticipating my flinch, to rise, to withdraw, to embark on an endeavour. Yet I refrained, not for a moment. The television cast a shimmering glow upon the walls. In the distance, a dog barked, its voice echoing through the quiet air. Within, all I could perceive was the gradual ebb of my own breath, slowing with each passing moment. More superficial. "I ought to make a move," I murmured softly. His voice was hardly audible. "Are you interested in doing that?" I chose not to respond. I ought to have taken a stand. I ought to have turned and left. I ought to have brushed it aside with a chuckle, reprimanded him, expressed a thought on limits or what crossed your mind, or perhaps simply refrain from saying anything. However, I did not. Instead, I allowed the silence to linger, extending its reach. His thumb traced delicate rhythmic circles across my jeans, soft, as though he were etching my essence into the very threads of his being. With deliberate slowness, I shifted my gaze toward him. His eyes lacked any hint of mischief. They lingered in uncertainty. Apprehension and an unnamed sensation lingered. It reflected all the emotions I had been reluctant to acknowledge for months. "I ought not to," I murmured. He remarked that you haven't done so yet. I loathed the clarity it brought. I loathed that I failed to intervene. It began without a kiss. It began with a breath caught in my throat. He was so close that I could sense his presence, brushing against the side of my face as we lingered there, feigning interest in an old film. Neither of us had truly been engaged with for at least 10 minutes. The room was shrouded in shadows, illuminated solely by the flickering glow of the television and the soft amber light seeping in from the hallway nightlight. The remainder of the house lay in slumber or silence. I truly found myself unable to recall any longer. All sensations seemed muted, as if the moment had submerged below the realm of reality. I shifted my gaze in his direction, gradually. My heart thudded with a weighty rhythm. His hand lingered on my thigh, his thumb gliding along the seam of my jeans, as if he were unaware of the intimacy of the gesture. Yet he did. We both participated. I might have uttered a sound, cleared my throat, or even laughed it off. Called his name with a piercing maternal voice to jolt us back to reality. Instead, I murmured, "I've contemplated this." His eyes remained unblinking. He maintained an air of composure, showing no signs of surprise. Merely offered a slight nod, "Same here." Then the kiss arrived. Silent, intimate, hesitant. His lips brushed against mine, soft and quivering. It didn't seem like an act of evasion. It was as if a barrier had shattered. I can't recall the moment I leaned back, yet here I was, nestled against the cushions. The blanket remained neatly folded beside me. My hand rested against the nape of his neck while he leaned over me. The fabric of my t-shirt gathered uncomfortably beneath my ribs. His body was not heavy, merely near, solid, genuine. Though time was abundant, an undeniable sense of urgency permeated the air. His hand glided under the edge of my shirt. His skin radiated heat, an intensity that felt almost overwhelming. I inhaled sharply before I could rein it in, and he hesitated. "I can stop," he declared. My hand rested gently on his back. Refrain. I spoke too quickly, excessively eager. I feared that if I allowed myself even a moment more to ponder, my decision might waver. If only I had allowed myself, I would have done it. However, I chose not to. I lifted my chin, shut my eyes, and allowed myself to embrace what I had longed for, not merely the touch, but the sensation of being truly seen, truly observed. Not in the role of a mother, a wife, or as a responsible woman navigating her 40s, as if there was an unfulfilled desire lingering within. His lips traced a path down my neck, each movement slow and intentional. Every inhalation he made felt like a whispered secret pushing against me with an undeniable weight. I stood quaking not out of fear, but under the immense pressure of every boundary crumbling simultaneously. The sofa groaned softly under his movement. My jeans hung loosely while my shirt was askew, caught in a moment of disarray. All sensations seemed laid bare yet secure, incorrect yet desired. I held on to him as if he could vanish at any moment, or perhaps it was I who might fade away. It lacked refinement, it was unscripted, and it wasn't an event we had envisioned or rehearsed repeatedly in our thoughts. It was awkward in the truest sense, as if two souls were emerging from a long slumber within their own forms, rediscovering the essence of existence after an eternity. A noise echoed from the hallway, a soft creak, perhaps a pipe shifting in the shadows. We stood still, our breaths caught in our throats. He withdrew a bit. Our foreheads met in a gentle embrace. The perspiration glistened at his temple. "We're not meant to be doing this," he murmured, his voice barely rising above a whisper. "I understand." Neither of us stirred. In that moment, I leaned in closer, reconnecting my lips with his, for the hourglass had already run out of sand. We had already taken that leap into the unknown. There was no returning to what once was. After we lay there entwined and partially clothed in silence, the credits glided across the screen, a silent procession of names and roles. We were oblivious to the film that had unfolded before us. I gazed at him still sprawled beside me on that couch shirt, askew hair, tousled lips, a deep red and swollen from our kisses. "What unfolds next?" I inquired. He remained silent, for we were both aware that nothing unfolds in this moment, nothing of value. Everything feels out of the ordinary. Only guilt and memory lingered, accompanied by the subtle unraveling that would commence the moment the morning light graced our faces. As dawn broke, the couch remained unchanged, its familiar form untouched by the passage of time. The cushions remain unchanged, the blanket still neatly folded, and the familiar soft indentation where I always settled in awaits me. What transpired in that place remains a mystery, only if you cast your gaze upon me. I found myself in the kitchen holding a coffee cup that remained untouched. My hands remained calm, yet my heart raced wildly. His breath lingered on my collarbone, a whisper of warmth that sent shivers down my spine. The gentle weight of his presence not overwhelming, but just enough to remind me that I was cherished, that someone had embraced me as if I truly mattered. The sound of the bathroom door creaked softly, echoing down the hallway, the door belonging to him. A heaviness settled in my chest. I kept my gaze fixed, avoiding his presence as he strolled by, yet I sensed it. That moment of tension where we both feigned ignorance, as if the incident were a wound, concealed beneath fabric, still raw, still throbbing. He filled a glass with water. Silence enveloped us. I had a thought I wished to express. Everything. Yet the silence resonated more profoundly than any spoken phrase. And a part of me was filled with dread, fearing that if I spoke I would either break down in tears or ask, "Can we experience this once more?" For that reason, it was the most challenging aspect. The desire lingered on. It had expanded. That night left a lingering emptiness. It stirred to life. Each time I walked by, my gaze inevitably drifted toward the hallway. Nighttime found me steering clear of the living room. I secured my door at night not out of fear of his intrusion, but from the worry that I might willingly invite him in. He made no effort. He maintained his space. Respectful, proceed with caution, as per usual. Yet a transformation had occurred within his gaze, a matter that demanded my attention, a subtle warmth tempered with reverence, yet still smouldering beneath the surface. Several days later, our paths converged in the laundry room. As he extended his hand to seize the basket, his fingers lightly grazed against mine. We stood still, caught in a moment of disbelief. I whispered his name gently. Only a single time. He cast his gaze in my direction, truly examined. "It occupies my mind incessantly," he remarked. I remained utterly still. "I feel the same way." He took a step back. "However, we ought not to. I understand." We found ourselves in that tiny confined space enveloped by towels and the gentle drone of the dryer. The aroma of fabric softener wafted through the room. What was once the most mundane corner of the house transformed in an instant, taking on the weighty air of a confessional booth. I averted my gaze before he could catch sight of the tears welling in my eyes. I believed I could simply feign, return to the way things were. Are you able to negative? I lingered in anticipation, hoping he would elaborate further. He did not. The dryer emitted a series of beeps. I snatched a towel, seeking a distraction for my restless hands. As he exited the room, I murmured softly, my gaze fixed elsewhere. We acted with intention. We exercised caution for an extended period. At this moment, it feels overwhelming. He lingered in the threshold, yet he never returned. As I settled onto the porch steps that evening, a wineglass cradled in my hand, I observed the sun slowly retreating behind the trees. The light cast a gentle glow, rendering everything softer, as if it were attempting to deceive me into believing that I was truly all right. A soft creak echoed as the door swung open behind me. I did not turn. I recognized the sound of his footsteps, now more measured than the lighter tread of my husband's. Proceed with caution. He perched at the far end of the steps, far from it, just a short distance away, just enough to create a palpable tension in the air filled with the unspoken words that lingered between us. "You've been rather silent these days," he remarked. "Contemplation has been occupying my mind." He gave a slight nod. "Same here." The cicadas hummed with a vibrant energy. A vehicle glided past. A neighbour along the street tended to their lawn with a refreshing sprinkle of water. All that surrounded us appeared utterly ordinary, so pure. "I ought to have prevented it," I murmured. "Yet you did. I understand. I allowed you to continue without interruption. I am aware of that as well." We both gazed into the void, my throat constricted. "I have no desire to cause anyone pain," I expressed. "In that case, refrain from doing so." At last I turned my gaze toward him. "It sounds as if you believe I have the power to reverse it." He remained silent. Within the soft clinking of dishes echoed gently. My husband was tidying up after dinner. I never mentioned that I wasn't hungry. I merely moved the food around on my plate until he ceased his inquiries. For months, perhaps even years, his gaze had shifted away from me, no longer holding the same warmth it once did. I once believed that was a burden I had to bear. Then another person regarded me as if I held significance. "You want to stop?" he inquired. I inhaled deeply. I longed to return to that part of myself that resisted this path, yet she has departed. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I'm uncertain about how to navigate my presence around you at this moment. In that case, refrain from being." The words escaped my lips before I had the chance to hold them back. They resonated with a sense of conclusion. Yet I found myself questioning whether I truly intended to say farewell. Perhaps I was merely attempting to safeguard the remnants of my being. "Someone is bound to take notice," I added. He gave a slight nod. "It seems my daughter may already have an inkling of what's going on. Her gaze lingers on me at times, as if she's attempting to ensnare me in some unspoken truth." He rose gradually, as if the burden of everything was bearing down upon his spine. "I won't complicate things for you," he said. I never uttered a farewell. I never asked him to remain. He descended the steps, traversed the yard, and entered the muted street where the shadows melded him into recollection. I lingered in that place until my wine lost its chill. As I stepped inside, my husband glanced up from his task at the sink. "Are you all right?" I inclined my head in agreement. Yet the silence I carried within me responded in an unexpected way. As I reclined in bed that night, gazing at the ceiling, my own voice echoed in my mind, repeating endlessly, "Gentle, broken, fearful." I maintained silence for years, my emotions, my desires. As soon as I released them, the entire landscape shifted. Perhaps it was a mistake, yet in that fleeting instant it became undeniably tangible.